Hello, my name is Claus Hélix-Nielsen. I'm going to talk about targeted membranes, and especially the things we want to target here is water treatment and purification of water in general. So water as a technology driver is a very strong driver. Of course, as you know, a lot of people do not have access to fresh water, and there's also a lot of people getting sick or even dying from diseases born out of contaminated water. If we look at where water is used nowadays, we can see that a lot of it is used in agriculture, to be used in irrigation of crops, not so much in Denmark, but certainly in other places of the world. Industrial use, especially for the production of energy, is very important. And of course, we also take a shower once in a while, so we do also have a domestic use. So all these things, they go together because water is actually used, as we just saw, just for food generation and energy production beyond just being water that we need. So this is our triangle that we need to look at, and water is really essential for this. If we then add in the effect of climate change, then of course we can see we're really left now in a crunch where water reuse and really making sure we use the water in the right way becomes very important. And this is often referred to as the water, energy, food nexus, this kind of crunch that we are sitting in here. On the other hand, if you look at the planet from sort of a bit from above, we would say, well, you have actually a lot of water on this planet here. This is the blue planet, a lot of ocean water, of course. But if we look at how much water we can actually use, it's rather limited. So now we're doing a drastic experiment on a computer. Nobody is getting hurt here. Remove all the water from the planet and place it in one place. This is what's done here. So if we look at this sphere here, this is all the water that we have on this planet, including the water that we have inside our body. Everything is there. Then if we look at how much do we have actually as fresh water, it's the sphere, you can see, is shrinking dramatically here. This is including groundwater and, of course, surface water and so on. But if we look at what actually a lot of people in the world are relying on is fresh water from lakes and rivers, this is a very, very small sphere compared to the planet Earth, which means that we are really in a dire situation here. We need to treat water, we need to reuse water, and we also need to think about different types of water, different types of clean water for different applications. Now this woman here in Ganges, she's trying to make drinking water out of the polluted river water. She's using her sari here. She's been wearing this sari for a couple of days, and that gives exactly this kind of a little bit greasy sari that makes this membrane work. So it makes actually this polluted water into some water that she can drink. So basically, what is the sari doing? The sari is actually doing this. It is acting as a material where the diffusion of water is relatively easy, whereas the diffusion of other stuff, solid that you don't want to go through, it could be bacteria, viruses, and so on, is actually being rejected by these membranes. So these two velocities has to be equal for water and different for solutes. Then we have a membrane. Well, that's okay, that's fine. But the problem arises if we want to do something a little more tricky. We want to desalinate seawater, for example. Then we will need to separate ions from water. Now I put sodium here because sodium chloride is the main constituent of seawater. And seawater actually has a natural osmotic pressure, that is this tendency of these water molecules to cluster around the sodium ions, which translates into a pressure of about 25 bars. In other words, if I am to squeeze water out from seawater, fresh water out of seawater, I will need to apply a pressure which exceeds this 25 bars. So if I run this down to like half of the volume here, now suddenly the pressure needed is 50 bars. So this very thin material here, you want this to be thin to be effective, cannot stand alone. It needs to be backed up, and this is typically what we do in industry, make these composite membranes where you have the active layers, we call it, where the separation takes place, is then being backed by material that allows it to be more stable. Diffusion is something that is considered a little bit slow, you can say. Could we replace it with some convection? There are some materials out there where convection in very small, narrow pores is actually very efficient for transporting water. But the point is that these pores has to be extremely narrow in order for this to work. This one here would work, but if we just go to this one here, which is on an atomic scale, very small, just a little bit bigger than this one over there, it doesn't work. So we are left with a problem. How do we actually, you can do this on a computer, but in reality this is really hard. But actually nature has done this already. So nature has developed these channels here. They are sitting in the whole kingdom of life. They are all over, and they are responsible for transport of water across cell membranes. And basically you can recognize a little bit sort of the single file transport of water going through here. And these channels here are remarkably efficient in transporting water and very good at rejecting solutes. So we take these and use them as building blocks in membranes. Before we do that, we just have to make sure that they actually work. This is an experiment where we put them into these small vesicles here. We subject them to an osmotic stress. In other words, we let water leave the vesicles rapidly. We shine light on them, and then light is then scattered more as they go smaller. And this is what you see on this curve here. If you do the blank experiment with no aquaporins, or one that we change so it doesn't work anymore, we get exactly the same. So we know these aquaporins that are doing the trick. So now what we did was that we implemented these aquaporin proteins here in a polymeric matrix and put it in like this. And you can sort of you can see the little spheres here on top of this support. And this is our first handmade membranes. We are now actually making this into an upscale production in the company that I'm also associated with. And this is our prototype of such a machine. And the membranes that comes out of this machine can actually outperform membranes that you buy on the market today. So this is a water flux. How many liters per square meter per hour can you transport? This is how much rejection you can obtain. Sodium chloride, again, you can say Model C water. Perfect rejection will be out here. High water flux is also good. So the best part to be in this diagram will be up here. And you can see aquaporin membranes actually are quite efficient in this case. They are outperforming these other membranes. So this is the prototype that we have now. This is the membrane that I'm performing here. And this is a membrane which is spiral wounded, so it's rolled up, so it's actually quite big if I roll it up. And then this is a product that we can actually sell on the market today. Reverse osmosis, that was one thing, but osmosis also occurs in nature. It is a spontaneous process. So actually you can use this process simply to extract water, just as we saw in these vesicles here. So imagine you have wastewater here and you have seawater here. Then basically the osmotic pressure difference will allow the water to be transported and concentrate the wastewater. That's a very simple and low energy consuming way of reducing the amount of wastewater that you have. Another example would be to say, we have brackish water we would like to use for irrigation in agriculture. We then take a concentrated fertilizer. We again let osmosis work spontaneously, getting as a result diluted fertilizer that we can use for irrigation. And then basically now we are using a source that otherwise we could not use for making use in agriculture. So these are two examples where these osmotic membranes actually are quite useful. Another case if we combine them, because these membranes here are also very good at rejecting other solutes, other nasty stuff that we don't want to get in here. So we can use it as a pre-treatment for a reverse osmosis membrane that will then regenerate whatever we have on this side here. Imagine we have sodium chloride here, drives all the water out, we then recycle the water and produce clean water. In other words, this membrane here makes sure that none of these nasty stuff actually sees this membrane. This membrane will only see sodium chloride and therefore be much easier to maintain and therefore also cheaper to operate. And this is one of the main things about membranes. Make them cheaper to operate is a major issue. Now finally I would like to thank all the partners that have been involved in this project. This has gone over more than 10 years and a lot of backing from both public and private partnerships. And of course also the aquaporin, which has now grown to a whole group of companies that is supporting the commercialization of this technology. And thank you very much for your attention.